The janitor moved quietly through the empty hall, pushing his cart of cleaning supplies across the polished wooden floor. The echoes of his footsteps seemed unusually loud in the vast space, bouncing from the high ceilings and empty chairs. It was late, long past the time anyone would normally be here. The stage lights were dimmed, and only a few emergency lights glowed softly in the corners. He paused for a moment, listening to the silence. It was the kind of silence that made a person feel small, yet oddly safe. As if the world outside had disappeared and left only this quiet bubble. He had worked here for many years. Most people knew him only as the janitor who swept the floors and emptied the trash. Few knew about the life he lived outside these walls, or the secret passion that waited for him in the quiet moments like this. The piano on the stage, a grand instrument with shining black and white keys, had been there for decades. Many famous performers had played it, leaving their mark in the form of sound and memory, yet it had always seemed just out of reach for him. Until now, he approached the piano cautiously, almost reverently. His hands hovered over the keys, and he felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. No one would hear him. No one would judge him. This was his own private concert, and he could pour out everything he had kept inside. He pressed a single key, listening to the tone, letting it sink into the quiet around him. The note resonated longer than he expected, vibrating through the wooden floor and into his bones. He smiled softly to himself and then pressed another key, and another. Slowly, he began to play a melody that had lived in his mind for years. The notes were gentle at first, tentative, as if testing the waters. The sound filled the empty hall, weaving through the shadows of the chairs and the stage curtains. Each key he pressed was a word, a thought, a memory. He had learned to play in small moments, whenever he could find time in his crowded life, sneaking minutes here and there like a thief. Yet those stolen moments had been enough to make him skilled, more than skilled, really. He could make the piano speak in ways that could touch anyone who listened. As he played, memories surfaced without warning. He remembered a time long ago when music had been everything to him. He had dreamed of stages, applause, and the thrill of performing before an audience that hung on every note. But life had a way of closing doors. Responsibilities, bills, and endless compromises had slowly shifted his path. Music had become something he touched only when no one was watching. A secret friend who never judged or left him. The hall. Usually so ordinary in the daytime with people walking past without a second thought, now felt like a living entity. The piano's voice echoed back from the walls as if the building itself was responding to him. The rhythm of his fingers became a dialogue, a quiet conversation with the world that had overlooked him for so long. He closed his eyes and let the music flow, his movements almost instinctive. Every note was deliberate yet free, carefully measured yet full of emotion. Time lost all meaning. Minutes felt like seconds, and hours could have passed without him noticing. The outside world, the noise of traffic, the chatter of people, the constant rush of life faded into nothingness. There was only the music, the hall, and him. The lights above cast soft shadows, and the polished floor reflected the keys like a dark mirror. He noticed the small imperfections in the instrument, the tiny scratches and dents, but they only added character. The piano had lived, and it had seen more than he ever would. Yet it welcomed him as if it had been waiting. He remembered the first time he had sat at this piano many years ago. Back then, he had been too shy to play, too scared that someone would hear. He had touched the keys hesitantly, fingers trembling, unsure if he even remembered the basics. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was no longer a novice, no longer the timid janitor who only dreamed. Tonight he was a musician, even if the world outside didn't know it. A soft breeze from an open window stirred the curtains, brushing against the floor as the melody deepened. He leaned into the music, letting it carry him along. Each chord was a story, each pause a breath taken for reflection. He wasn't thinking about fame, money, or recognition. He was thinking only of the music itself, of the way it could express what words never could. It was a conversation with his own heart, and for the first time in years, he felt truly understood. The sound shifted from gentle and tentative to bold and confident. His fingers danced across the keys, a blur of motion, but never reckless. Each note was measured, controlled, yet full of life. He remembered lessons he had once taken, teachers who had long since forgotten him, and he used their words as guidance. The piano responded to him like an old friend, giving back more than he had imagined. There was joy in the sound, quiet triumph that had nothing to do with applause and everything to do with mastery and expression. Sometimes, he caught himself smiling, realizing how lucky he was to have this moment. So many people never find even one thing that brings them true peace, yet here he was, surrounded by silence and light, making music that felt timeless. The janitor could feel a change inside him, a renewal that had nothing to do with anything outside these walls. The music filled a space in him that had been empty for years, space that life's burdens had crowded and ignored. Outside, the city carried on, unaware. People rushed through streets, caught in their routines, oblivious to the life blossoming in the quiet hall. Inside, time moved differently. A melody became a story became a memory, and the memory became a release. He let himself feel every emotion he had held back. The regret, the longing, the hope, and the simple joy of creation. The piano was not just wood and strings. It was a bridge, a living companion, that connected him to something greater than himself. As the music swelled, he imagined an audience, not for the sake of applause, for the connection. Each note he played was an invisible thread reaching out to someone who might one day hear it, someone who might understand. He smiled again, thinking that maybe, just maybe, music had a way of finding people. Even when the world seemed too busy to notice, the janitor continued to play, lost in the sound and in himself. His tired arms and aching fingers seemed to disappear as he moved with the rhythm. The music was his escape, his freedom, and his statement to the world. No one could take it away, no one could judge it. Here, in this quiet hall, he was not a janitor, not a man who had missed chances and struggled with life's weight. He was simply a musician, and that was enough. Hours could have passed, but he didn't notice. Only the music mattered, only the notes, the harmony, and the silence between. He experimented, tried new chords, revisited old favorites, and even created new melodies on the spot. Every touch of the keys brought a new surprise, a new emotion, a new story. He felt alive in a way he hadn't felt in years, reminded that talent and passion do not disappear, even if life pushes them aside. Eventually, as the last note lingered in the air, soft and fading, he let it hang for a moment, savoring the silence that followed. Slowly, he lifted his hands from the keys and leaned back, breathing heavily but smiling. The hall seemed to sigh with him, as if acknowledging the music and the effort he had poured into it. For a moment, everything was still, perfect in its simplicity. The janitor gathered himself and pushed the cart toward the exit, his mind still filled with the echoes of the piano. He felt lighter, freer, and strangely hopeful. He knew that this moment was only his, that it might never be witnessed, but it had given him something priceless, a reminder of who he really was beneath the uniform and the duties of the day. The music had spoken for him when he could not, and that was a victory in itself. As he closed the hall door behind him, the last light flickered out, leaving only the memory of the music and the silent, empty space. Outside, the night continued, but inside, something had changed. The janitor had played, and in doing so, he had reclaimed a piece of himself that the world had never taken. It was quiet, it was private, but it was powerful, and it was real. The next morning, the janitor arrived at the hall as usual, pushing his cart through the doors with the same quiet steps. The bright sunlight spilled across the polished floors, revealing the tiny scratches and marks that had accumulated over years of use. To anyone else, it was just a building, another job. But to him, it was more than that. Every corner, every chair, every key on the piano held a memory, a secret that no one else could see. As he went about his duties, sweeping and polishing, his mind kept returning to last night. The music, the freedom, the feeling of finally expressing himself, it lingered like a soft echo. He realized that no matter how long he worked here, or how unnoticed he was by the world, these moments at the piano reminded him of who he truly was. It wasn't about recognition or fame. It was about connection with the music and with himself. He thought about his life outside the hall. He had lived quietly, never demanding attention, always taking responsibility for others before himself. The world had taught him patience, taught him that dreams often had to be set aside for survival. He had sacrificed for family, for stability, for things that seemed necessary at the time. Yet the music had always been there, waiting for him in those rare, quiet moments. During his breaks, he would sometimes sit in the staff room, wiping his hands on a rag, staring out the window at people rushing past. He imagined them listening to music somewhere, laughing, sharing stories, living lives full of colors and sound. And he wondered if they ever thought about him. The janitor who moved silently through the hallways, who had a secret world hidden beneath his routine? Probably not. That was fine. He didn't need their attention. He only needed the piano. He remembered the first piano he had ever touched, an old upright in his childhood home. It was battered and out of tune, but it had felt like magic beneath his fingers. He had spent hours there, learning, experimenting, dreaming. Even when his family moved, even when life demanded other skills and other responsibilities. That love for music had never left him. It had followed him like a shadow, silent but constant, waiting for the day he could return at the hall. He found small ways to sneak those moments in. When rehearsals ended and performers left, he would linger, pretending to check for forgotten items or adjust a chair. And then he would sit. Fingers hovering over the keys, he would take a deep breath, letting the stillness welcome him. The piano seemed to recognize him, greeting him with the same familiarity every time he sat down. It didn't matter that he had no audience. It didn't matter that no one would hear him. The music was its own reward. Today, he allowed himself a few minutes during lunch to sit at the piano. He began softly, the same tentative notes that had become his ritual. But as his confidence grew, so did the music. He experimented with new melodies, trying chords he had never dared to combine before. Some sounded wrong, some sounded beautiful, but all of them felt like a conversation with the hall itself. The wooden floor, the high ceilings, the empty chairs, they absorbed his music and sent it back, amplifying it, giving it life beyond what he had imagined as he played. Memories of his past kept surfacing. He remembered teachers who had recognized his talent, encouraging words that had long since faded into the past. He remembered moments of disappointment, auditions that had not gone well, opportunities that had slipped away. But alongside those memories were the ones that gave him strength, the joy of creating something purely from himself. The satisfaction of mastering a difficult piece, the wonder of discovering new sounds. These memories reminded him that talent could survive hardship, and that passion could endure even in silence. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and imagine an audience, not a large one, but a single person listening with full attention. He imagined their reactions, the subtle shifts in their expressions, the quiet understanding that came from feeling something real. It wasn't a fantasy of fame. It was a fantasy of connection, of sharing what had been hidden for so long, of finally being seen for who he really was. Outside the hall, life continued its relentless pace. People spoke, laughed, argued, and hurried through streets without noticing the quiet world inside the music hall. The janitor sometimes felt invisible, a shadow moving among them, a life unnoticed. And yet, inside, he had a stage, a voice, and an audience of one, himself. The music made him feel alive in a way nothing else could. It reminded him that identity was not defined by recognition, but by what we cherish and nurture in secret. He remembered the people he had passed by, the faces he had seen, and the fleeting connections that had never gone deeper. And he realized that music had become his deepest connection, a bridge to emotions and experiences that words could not capture. Every note he played was an expression of longing, joy, sorrow, and hope. Every pause was a breath, a reflection, a moment to gather himself before reaching further into the sound. The hall had a rhythm of its own. Even in silence, it seemed to breathe, responding to the weight of footsteps and the resonance of keys. He felt a part of it, as if he belonged not just as a janitor, but as someone who had something to contribute to the space, even if quietly. The walls held stories of performances past and now. He added his own small story to that legacy. As the day wore on, he moved from task to task, cleaning, arranging, ensuring that the hall was perfect for the next day. His hands were busy, but his mind kept returning to the piano. He thought about melodies he wanted to try, chords he wanted to explore, the way he could express feelings he could not put into words. It was a kind of planning, a kind of dreaming, and it gave his ordinary day a spark of purpose and excitement. During the evening, after the hall emptied and the sun had dipped below the horizon, he allowed himself another private session. This time, he played with more freedom, letting the music guide him rather than forcing structure. His fingers moved with ease, producing sounds that were sometimes gentle, sometimes bold, but always authentic. He felt the piano respond, each key welcoming his touch, each chord embracing his effort. He remembered a time when life had been simpler, when dreams felt attainable and mistakes seemed fixable. And he remembered the lessons of adulthood, the ways in which hope could be tested, altered, and sometimes postponed. Yet the music reminded him that hope was never truly lost. It could be revived, reshaped, and expressed anew. The hall, empty as it was, became a sanctuary where the past and present converged, where he could reconcile his life's challenges with his deepest desires. The night deepened, and the hall grew colder. The janitor played a final piece, slow and deliberate, savoring each note as if it were a final word in a conversation he had been having for years. The sound hung in the air, lingering, echoing, fading into silence. He lifted his hands, feeling both exhaustion and satisfaction. He had given himself something priceless, something no one could take away. The music had carried him, supported him, reminded him that life's hardships could not diminish the human spirit when it clung to what truly mattered. As he left the hall, he paused in the doorway, taking a moment to look back. The piano sat quietly, as if waiting for his return, patient and understanding. He smiled softly, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day, another chance to express himself, to connect with the music that had always been his companion. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm and fulfillment that had nothing to do with recognition or reward. It was simply the joy of being alive, and of being true to himself. One night, late after the hall had emptied, the janitor walked through the corridors carrying his cleaning supplies. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred. He could hear his own footsteps echoing softly, blending with the faint hum of the city outside. Normally, he felt completely alone in these moments, but tonight, something was different. There was a faint sound behind him, barely noticeable, like the shuffle of a person's shoes on the marble floor. He paused for a moment, unsure if he had imagined it. The janitor was used to silence, to being alone with his thoughts and his music. He moved toward the grand piano at the center of the hall, the familiar gleam of the keys inviting him. As always, he hesitated before sitting down, as if acknowledging the piano's quiet dignity. But tonight, he sensed eyes on him, even though the hall was empty. He shook off the thought, attributing it to his imagination. This was his secret place, and no one else should be here. He began to play softly, letting the notes fill the room like a gentle wind. The melody was simple at first, calm and reflective, as if speaking to the walls themselves. His fingers moved with confidence, each note deliberate, carrying emotion he could not speak aloud. He closed his eyes and let the music take him, the hall becoming a world of sound and memory as he played. He became aware of the quiet again, a subtle presence he could not ignore. He opened his eyes slowly and, to his surprise, saw a figure standing near the doorway. At first he thought it might be another staff member, someone who had forgotten their keys or stayed late by mistake. But the figure remained silent, motionless, watching him play. There was no sudden intrusion, no harsh light or loud greeting. Only a quiet attention that made the janitor's heart race. He stopped playing for a moment, unsure of what to do. "Hello?" he asked softly, though his voice sounded loud in the empty hall. The figure did not move or respond. The janitor's instincts told him not to panic. There was nothing threatening in the presence, only curiosity and quiet observation. Slowly he returned to the keys, letting the music continue, though now with a heightened awareness. Each note seemed to stretch into the air, reaching toward the silent listener. The figure remained at the back of the hall, standing still, yet completely absorbed in the music. The janitor began to recognize something in the posture and demeanor of the visitor, an appreciation, respect, perhaps even a recognition of skill. He had never played for anyone like this before, never for someone who could understand the nuances and depth of his music without a single word. The realization made him nervous and excited at the same time. He continued to play, letting the melody grow richer and more complex. He added chords and subtle harmonies, experimenting with dynamics and rhythm in ways he had never dared before. The hall responded to him, each note echoing softly from the high ceilings and empty walls, creating a resonance that felt alive. The silent figure did not interrupt or move, only listening, taking in every sound, every nuance. Memories of his past surfaced as he played. He thought of lessons long ago, of teachers who had encouraged him in performances that had never happened. He remembered the times he had given up opportunities for practical reasons, the small sacrifices he had made for family and duty, and he remembered the secret moments when he had allowed himself to play alone, letting the music carry him away from the weight of reality. Tonight, all of those memories converged in the notes he played, creating something entirely new and deeply personal. The figure finally stepped closer, but still silently, not disturbing the flow of music. The janitor could feel a presence that was respectful, someone who understood that this was a private moment, yet appreciated its value. He realized that his music was speaking not only to the empty hall, but also to this unseen listener. Every emotion he had buried over the years, hope, longing, joy, sorrow, found its way into the keys. Reaching out in a silent conversation, he played for a long time, letting the music grow and recede like waves on a shore. Sometimes he would pause, take a breath, and reflect on what he had played, only to dive back into the melody with renewed energy and emotion. The hall seemed to breathe with him, absorbing and reflecting every note. The silent figure never left, never spoke, only observed and absorbed the music as if it were a rare gift. Eventually, the janitor noticed that the figure had moved even closer, stopping near the edge of the stage. It was then he realized that the person was a visitor of importance, someone who carried an air of experience and authority. But there was no intimidation in their stance, only genuine interest and quiet admiration. The janitor's heart beat faster, but he did not let it stop him. He kept playing, trusting the music to speak for him. The melody shifted, becoming more expressive, more daring. He experimented with new rhythms, unexpected chords, and intricate passages that tested his own skill. The hall seemed to encourage him, amplifying the sound in ways that made him feel as though he were performing for an audience of thousands. Even though only one person was present, the energy in the room was palpable. A shared experience between the janitor, the piano, and the silent visitor as the night progressed. He noticed subtle gestures from the figure, a nod, a shift in posture, a soft intake of breath, small signs that the music was being appreciated, understood, and felt. The janitor felt a surge of confidence, realizing that his secret talent was not invisible, that it could resonate with someone who truly listened. The connection was unspoken yet powerful, a reminder that music could communicate beyond words, beyond barriers, and beyond expectation. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if this person spoke, if they offered encouragement or guidance, if they recognized the years of practice and dedication that had led to this moment. He had spent so long playing in solitude that the idea of being acknowledged was almost overwhelming. Yet he did not rush, did not break the flow of music, letting each note carry the emotion he could not yet express in words. The visitor finally stepped closer, moving to the front of the stage, yet still silent. Their presence was steady, unwavering, and completely attentive. The janitor realized that he had never experienced anything like this before, a listener who could truly hear him. The fear of being judged, the worry of being interrupted, all faded away, replaced by a quiet courage and the joy of sharing his music. Even in silence, he played until the final notes hung in the air, vibrating softly against the walls. The hall was filled with a lingering echo, a testament to the hours spent pouring emotion into the keys. The janitor lifted his hands, heart racing, uncertain of what would happen next. The figure finally spoke, a calm voice filled with warmth and respect. The janitor listened, tense but curious, as the words acknowledged the music, the skill, and the passion that had been hidden for so long, for the first time in years. The janitor felt seen, not for his work as a caretaker of the hall, but for the talent and dedication he had nurtured in secret. The visitor's presence had transformed a private ritual into a shared experience, and the realization was both exhilarating and humbling. The night had brought more than music. It had brought recognition, understanding, and the possibility of new opportunities. As he gathered his cleaning supplies and left the hall that night, the janitor walked with a quiet sense of pride and anticipation. He knew that something had shifted, that the music he had kept to himself could now reach others, and that perhaps his life was on the brink of change. The silent hall, the piano, and the visitor had created a moment that would linger in his memory forever. A reminder that talent, patience, and passion could not remain hidden forever. Something new had begun, and he was ready to embrace it. The janitor froze for a moment, unsure of what to do as the visitor stepped closer. The room was heavy with the quiet that followed the last note, a silence filled with expectation. He had spent years playing alone, never imagining that someone of importance could be listening, let alone someone who might recognize his talent. His heart raced, and his hands shook slightly. But he stayed where he was, unsure whether to move or speak. The visitor finally spoke, their voice calm but warm, carrying no judgment, only curiosity and respect. That was remarkable, they said. The janitor blinked, startled. He had not expected words, only silence. The acknowledgement felt surreal, almost dreamlike. His life had been filled with moments of unnoticed effort, and here was someone not just noticing, but appreciating the music he had created in solitude for years. He swallowed hard and tried to respond, but words felt inadequate. Thank you, he managed, his voice quiet, almost breaking. The visitor smiled gently and nodded, encouraging him to continue, but in a way that made it clear there was no pressure. The janitor's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and nervous excitement. For the first time, his music had reached another human being in a meaningful way. The visitor walked slowly toward the piano, keeping their gaze on the janitor. "You have a gift," they said softly. "I can hear it in every note. This isn't something learned casually. It's something you carry with you." The janitor's fingers twitched, almost itching to return to the keys, and he realized that for years he had doubted himself. The recognition, simple yet profound, shook him to his core. It was one thing to play in private, but it was entirely another to hear someone validate the passion and skill he had nurtured alone. "I've just been playing here," he said, unsure how to explain that his life had been full of responsibilities that kept him from pursuing music fully. "No one really listens. I mean, the hall is empty most of the time. It's just..." For me, the visitor nodded, as if understanding without judgment. "That makes it even more special. You play not for applause or recognition, but because it matters to you. That honesty comes through in your music." They paused, letting the words sink in. "I've been in this industry for a long time. I hear a lot of talent, a lot of skill, but rarely someone who can make the instrument speak like you do. There's something real here, something rare." The janitor looked down at his hands, still hovering above the keys. He had never considered that someone might see his music as more than a hobby, more than a private escape. He had always thought of himself as just the caretaker, someone whose dreams were always in the background. The realization that his work had meaning beyond his own satisfaction brought a strange sense of humility and awe. The visitor moved closer, leaning slightly on the edge of the piano. "Have you ever performed for anyone before?" they asked. The janitor shook his head. "No, never I. I've never had the chance, and I've never felt it was my place." The visitor's expression softened. "You don't need permission to share your gift, but if you want to, there's a way. I would like to help you explore it. Not for fame, not for money, but to let the world hear what you've been keeping all these years." The words struck him like a wave. Help, opportunity, validation, for a lifetime. He had believed that his music existed only for himself, that it was something private, small, and insignificant. And yet here was someone offering not just recognition but guidance and a chance to share the music he had kept hidden. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and a cautious hope he hadn't felt in decades. "I don't know what to say," he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. The visitor smiled reassuringly. "Say nothing. Just think about it. Play for me again if you want, or we can talk. No pressure. This is your choice." The janitor took a deep breath and sat at the piano once more, fingers resting lightly on the keys. The hall was silent, but this time it was not the familiar solitude he was used to. There was a presence, a witness, someone who could hear and understand. He started to play slowly, letting the melody build, more confident now, more expressive. The visitor remained silent, watching and listening, allowing the music to flow uninterrupted as he played. Memories and emotions flooded him, moments of joy from his childhood, the frustration of missed opportunities, the quiet triumphs of practicing in secret. Each note was an expression of a life lived in balance between responsibility and passion, sacrifice and longing. The visitor's eyes followed his hands, attentive and appreciative, offering a silent affirmation that resonated deeper than any applause could. The janitor experimented with new chords, daring transitions he had never tried before, feeling the music guide his movements. The hall seemed to amplify the emotion, the keys responding as if they too were eager to express what had been held back for so long. He noticed subtle gestures from the visitor, nods, a faint smile, a breath taken at the right moment that reassured him. The music was not only being heard, it was being felt. After a long session, he stopped, letting the final note linger in the air. Silence returned, but it was now a different silence, filled with warmth and understanding. He looked up, expecting judgment, criticism, or indifference. Instead, he found a smile that made his chest tighten with emotion. "That was extraordinary," the visitor said simply. "You've carried this for years, and it shows. It's more than talent, it's honesty, courage, and heart." For a long moment, the janitor simply sat, absorbing the words. His mind replayed the music he had just created, but now it was seen through new eyes, acknowledged and appreciated. The visitor continued, "If you're willing, I'd like to help you take the next step. Not to push you into anything you don't want, but to explore what your music can truly do. There's potential here that shouldn't be hidden." He nodded slowly, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. The idea of stepping out of the safe, quiet world he had built for himself was intimidating, yet it was also exhilarating. For years, he had played in secret, thinking that was enough. Now, someone was offering a bridge to something larger, a chance to see how far his music could reach. The visitor reached out, offering a small notebook and a pen. "Write down your ideas, your pieces, even your thoughts about what you want to explore. Don't worry about perfection. Just capture what's inside you." The janitor took the notebook, fingers brushing against the smooth paper, feeling the weight of possibility. For the first time, his music seemed to have a life beyond the walls of the hall. Beyond his own hands, they spent the next hour talking quietly. Not about fame or money, but about music, expression, and potential. The visitor asked about his influences, his favorite pieces, the styles he enjoyed. The janitor spoke cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Realizing that his passion could be shared, discussed, and even guided, the conversation was calm, encouraging, and profoundly human. A meeting of understanding and shared appreciation. When it was time to leave, the visitor offered a final word of reassurance. "Think about what you want. You've already shown the world your talent in your own way. Now it's up to you to decide how to continue." The janitor nodded, heart full, mind buzzing with new ideas and possibilities. He packed up his cleaning supplies, but this time the hall felt different. It was no longer just a place for routine and solitude. It was a place where his music had been seen, acknowledged, and valued. He walked out into the night carrying not just his cart, but a renewed sense of purpose, a spark that promised something new on the horizon. Days passed, but the janitor could not stop thinking about the night he had been discovered. Every time he walked through the hall, the memory of the visitor's presence and the words of encouragement played in his mind like a familiar melody. For years he had carried his music in private, unseen and unappreciated. And now it seemed that the world might finally have a chance to hear it. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. He continued his work, sweeping floors, arranging chairs, and emptying trash, but his mind wandered to music constantly. He thought about pieces he had composed over the years, about chords and melodies that had lived in his imagination. For the first time, he considered sharing them beyond the hall, imagining the possibilities of performance, recording, or collaboration. The idea that his life could change because of something he had always held close to his heart filled him with hope. Each evening, he found himself at the piano, playing with renewed energy. He experimented with compositions he had only dreamed of, exploring the depths of emotion and creativity that had been waiting for a chance to emerge. The hall was empty, but now it felt different, alive with possibility. The echo of the last visitor's presence seemed to linger in the air, encouraging him to push further, to take risks, to express himself fully. One night, he received a message from the visitor. It was short but clear, an invitation to meet and discuss the next steps. The janitor felt a surge of excitement and nervousness. He had spent so long avoiding the spotlight that the idea of moving forward, of sharing his music intentionally, was daunting. But he also felt a deep trust, a belief that this person saw his talent for what it truly was, and that they would guide him without pressure. The meeting was calm and encouraging. The visitor spoke about possibilities, not obligations. About creating opportunities without forcing him into a path he wasn't ready for. They discussed composing in a studio, collaborating with other musicians, and even performing for small audiences at first. The focus was always on the music, on expression, and on the authenticity that had made the janitor's playing so special. Each suggestion felt like a doorway, a chance to explore, not a demand to leave his life behind. The janitor listened carefully, absorbing every word. He felt a cautious excitement, a sense that the years of practice, the moments of solitude, and the hidden passion had all been leading to this point. For the first time, he realized that the music he had thought of as private and small could have a life of its own. It could reach people, touch emotions, and create connections that he had never imagined. In the following weeks, he began to prepare in secret, not for fame or recognition, but for the chance to express himself fully. He practiced with intensity, refining pieces he had long held in memory, experimenting with new sounds, and learning to trust his instincts. The hall became his laboratory, a space where he could explore the limits of his creativity. Each note he played was a declaration, a quiet affirmation that talent and passion cannot remain hidden forever. When the day came for the first real testa, small studio session arranged by the visitor, the janitor felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. He walked into the studio, carrying his music and his nerves, unsure of what to expect. But as soon as he touched the keys, the familiar sense of freedom returned. The piano responded to him as it always had, the notes flowing naturally, carrying all the emotion, experience, and honesty he had cultivated over years. The session was not about perfection or impressing anyone. It was about capturing the essence of his music. He played with all the subtlety, depth, and emotion that had been his signature in the empty hall. The technicians and musicians around him listened quietly, appreciating the raw and authentic talent before them. Each pause, each chord, each melody was a conversation, sharing of his inner world without words. By the end of the session, the janitor felt exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, his music had been heard not as a secret, but as a work of art, with potential to connect with others. The visitor smiled, offering words of encouragement and gentle guidance, reminding him that this was only the beginning. They discussed the next steps, more recording sessions, opportunities to perform, and ways to develop his compositions further. It was a process, slow and respectful, designed to nurture his talent rather than rush it. In the weeks that followed, he began to see small changes in his life. People started recognizing him for more than his work as a janitor. He was invited to collaborate with musicians, to perform at small events, and to share his compositions with a wider audience. Each experience was new and slightly intimidating, but he faced it with the quiet confidence that had grown from years of playing in private. He had learned patience, resilience, and the power of dedication, and these qualities carried him through every new challenge. Through it all, he remained humble and grounded. He did not seek attention or accolades. His joy came from the music itself, from the act of creating and sharing something that had been cultivated with care and love. The piano remained central to his life, a trusted companion that had been with him through every moment of struggle, every secret triumph, and now every step of recognition and opportunity. One evening, after a successful small performance, he returned to the hall alone. He sat at the piano, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The music flowed naturally, a tapestry of emotions and experiences, weaving together the solitude of years past with the excitement of the present. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride in the fact that he had never abandoned his passion. Even when life demanded otherwise, he realized that the journey had been about more than recognition. It had been about discovering the resilience of the human spirit, about nurturing something deeply personal and allowing it to grow despite obstacles. The music had given him purpose, connection, and the courage to embrace opportunities without fear. It had been a companion, a teacher, and a bridge to a life he had never imagined. The hall was empty, yet it was alive with memory, echoing with every note he had played over the years. The janitor played on, each chord a reflection of his journey, each melody a testament to persistence, patience, and the quiet power of following one's passion. He understood now that talent is not always about being seen immediately, but about nurturing it faithfully, allowing it to grow until the moment comes when it can shine. As the final notes of the evening lingered in the air, he sat back, letting the silence wrap around him. The journey was far from over.